Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. But of course, before we get started, a quick shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video. For a limited time, use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. Friday is here. The week is over. The holiday weekend has begun. The Mets coming off of an off day. Hate to use off twice, but there we are. The Mets head into a 4-game series with the Atlanta Braves that we already previewed on the episode yesterday. So I thought with the off day behind us, I could be a little more creative. I could go outside of the box a little bit. It was a slow news day, and honestly, I think we can all agree the Mets needed a slow news day. I think Mets fans needed a slow news day after the firing of Mendoza and the installing of Andy Green as the interim manager and the press conference from David Stearns and then the podcast appearance from Steve Cohen, and everybody in the organization is speaking. And then the Mets lose a series, and it's just with everything going on, I think we could all use a little bit of let's pump the brakes, let's exhale. The baseball season is long, but sometimes the baseball season is relentless. The baseball season happens at you every day. And we all know this season, the baseball season has happened at the Mets fans and at the Mets fans against our will a lot of the time, the way this team has played. So I thought what we could talk about is what I believe to be currently on July 3rd, the 4 most valuable trade chips that the Mets have heading into the August 3rd trade deadline, which is now just 1 month away. And I will do my best to articulate why I think that these players are the best trade chips the Mets have, and whether or not I think the Mets will end up trading said players or not. Now, again, remember, I follow this team closely. I have relationships with some folks who have appeared on my other show, Till Mets Do Us Part, who may cover the team, beat reporters, people in sports media. But I myself do not have any sources. I myself have never claimed to be a baseball insider. I cover this sport and this team from a, what I like to call, knowledgeable, fan-centric perspective. So none of this is insider info. None of this should be taken as some kind of breaking news or some kind of nugget of information. It is just one man's opinion based on watching the Mets for a long time, watching baseball for a long time, and being able to kind of read what teams should do when they're in situations like this. And I will take these 4 in the order that they appear on the side of the screen. I think that this is the most valuable to least valuable of the 4 chips that the Mets have to play here at the trade deadline in order. Luke Weaver is where we will start. We have talked a lot about Luke Weaver on this show in the short time that I've been hosting this show, mainly because Luke Weaver has not given up a run since I have been hosting this show. Luke Weaver is in the midst of a 24-inning scoreless streak. That is 2 full months. He is just 3 innings behind Mark Guthrie, who has the Mets' franchise record for relief pitchers with 27 scoreless innings in a row. Luke Weaver has been dominant. Luke Weaver has been confident. Luke Weaver has taken the advice of Mets pitching coach Justin Willard to heart, it seems. Being nasty in the zone, trusting your stuff. Luke Weaver has good stuff. Luke Weaver is acting like he has good stuff. And Luke Weaver is showing that he has good stuff. He's lowered his season ERA to an even 2, which is a great mark for a relief pitcher, of course. So when you look at the tangible things, you look at the old school statistics, ERA, he checks that box. You look at the under the hood metrics, again, he's been nasty with his stuff, so he's going to check the boxes there. You can go on his Savant page and you can see what Luke Weaver has been able to do. Luke Weaver is also a guy who has closer's experience. He's got big market experience with the Mets and with the Yankees. He's got big game experience, playoff games, meaningful games in August and September. Of course, unfortunately for us Mets fans, all of that, or most of that, came across town with the New York Yankees. And like we talked about on the show the other day, when we brought up some of this stuff glowingly and waxing poetic about Luke Weaver, it's important to note that Luke Weaver also has one additional year of control left. So a team trying to acquire Luke Weaver would not just be acquiring Luke Weaver for the stretch 2 months of the season, the final 2 months, and hopefully what the acquiring team thinks will be a playoff berth. They will be acquiring Luke Weaver with the ability to control his rights as a contracted player for the next calendar year, for 2027. The Mets signed him to a 2-year deal in the offseason. So this team, obviously, if they're good and they're buying at the deadline, they can go ahead and they can just keep Luke Weaver for 2027. But again, relievers are always valuable commodities, most notably at the trade deadline, of course. But relievers are always going to be a valuable commodity when they're good. So a team that trades for him and maybe they fall out of it, maybe things don't go their way, but maybe they have Luke Weaver and maybe they decide in the offseason that they're going to use Luke Weaver as a trade chip. So Luke Weaver is immensely valuable. He is, I think, right now, because of the faltering of Freddie Peralta, who we'll talk about in the final segment, I think he is the most valuable trade chip the Mets have to play. Now, the question becomes, do I think the Mets will trade him sometime in the next month before the deadline? I do. I think the Mets will begrudgingly trade Luke Weaver. And I say begrudgingly because I think the Mets would like to keep Luke Weaver for a lot of the things I mentioned next year. He's been great. He is battle-tested in New York. He is battle-tested in the playoffs. He can step in and be your closer. There's a lot of things to like if you're a Mets team that is trying to also be competitive next year. But I think what's going to happen is all of those enticing things, all of those reasons why you want to keep him is going to make a team make an offer that you cannot refuse. Someone, somewhere, desperate is going to make a Godfather offer. Now, I don't know what that is. Okay, I don't claim to know. I'm not saying the Mets are going to get multiple pieces for Luke Weaver and, 3 top 100 prospects. That's not how this thing works with relief pitchers. But what I'm saying is there's going to be something. Someone is going to sweeten the deal because they're going to look at Luke Weaver as a difference maker. And someone's going to sweeten the deal to the tune where the Mets can no longer say no, regardless of if they really want to keep him or not. Whether that's one highly touted prospect, whether that's 2 pieces that are, in the upper minors that, seem like they're maybe not super high ceiling, but very high floor kind of players where you're like, oh, I think I know this guy or these 2 guys will be contributors. I think that's the kind of package that you're going to get that ultimately, if we're being honest, for as great as he is, I think you're going to get something back when you factor in also the team control aspect. If you're going to get prospects back, I think you're going to get something back that's just going to be more valuable than a relief pitcher. So I think Luke Weaver is the Mets' hottest commodity. I think he's their best asset, and I think they will trade him. We're going to move on from one former Yankee closer to another. And no, this one's name is not Devin Williams. It is Clay Holmes. Now, Clay Holmes is currently injured. That is a factor. Clay Holmes broke his fibula on a 111 mile per hour line drive off the bat of Spencer Jones from the aforementioned Yankees. He managed to stay in that game, Clay Holmes did, by the way, and I think he got like 7 more outs, something like that, after taking that ball off the shin. So the adrenaline was pumping clearly. He didn't think he was hurt that badly. He was pitching effectively enough. The Mets trainers came out, looked at him. Everything seemed fine. And then he's got a fractured bone in his leg, and he hasn't pitched since, obviously. Now, him being injured is part of this. He is expected to be back. He's already throwing, but now he is in like pre-spring training mode. He's going to need to have a full ramp up. He's going to need to get his feet under him. He's going to need to get his arm healthy. He's going to need to work up his innings. He's going to need to work up his pitch count. He's basically starting all over again. So he's expected back right now sometime in August. That's a pretty nebulous target, but that's how these things work out. So there's a good chance with the trade deadline being August 3rd that Clay Holmes will not be ready and pitching and proving that he's healthy by the time the trade deadline gets here. So an acquiring team would have to bank on him being healthy and regaining form. And the reason why I don't think teams are going to be super scared off by this is that it's not an arm injury. It's not a soft tissue injury. It's not an injury from even playing. It's not a wear and tear injury. It was a freak injury. It was an impact injury. It's lower body, so I'm sure he's been doing some arm exercises that he can keep his body, his arm in shape, his shoulder in shape, whatever. And so, yes, is there a ramp up? Of course. Does he have to get back to form? Yes. But if he gets back to form, you're talking about a guy who started 9 games. He was averaging just under 6 innings pitched. He had a 2.39 ERA. He was the Mets' best starting pitcher. He was certainly the Mets' most consistent starting pitcher. You know what he does with getting ground balls. He is efficient. He works fast. He does go deeper into games. He proved that last year after a little bit of hitting a wall in the middle of the summer. He was going deep early. He was going deep late. This season started off, he was so effective, so efficient, going deep in these games. And he's another guy like Luke Weaver, big market experience, big game experience. He does have, obviously, both starter and reliever and closer experience, but that one comes with a little bit of an asterisk because he hasn't been a relief pitcher in a couple seasons, and a team acquiring him, I think, would be acquiring him to be a starting pitcher, again, for all the reasons I just mentioned, how effective he's been. Although, I don't want to leave it out, because let's say he never fully gets stretched back out in this ramp up, this second spring training as he recovers from this injury. Well, you could use Clay Holmes if you're a team that's contending as, a multiple inning guy, a bulk guy, a multiple inning reliever at the ends, or the middle of games. And the rule book, the playbook goes out the window when you're talking about postseason games anyway, right? You might deploy your starting pitching and your pitching in general in all kinds of crazy ways. We saw the Dodgers 2 years ago throw bullpen games in the World Series. So I think Clay Holmes' familiarity with pitching in the 9th inning, pitching in the 1st inning, pitching in middle relief, starting, relieving, all of that, I think part of all of that factors into him being very valuable. Now, he does have a 2027 player option, but odds are he is not going to exercise that option. He is going to opt out. If he comes back this season, and we expect that he will, I think whether or not he stays with the Mets, if he is anything close to the guy who pitched to that 2.39 ERA, he is going to opt out. So you don't, unlike Luke Weaver, control his rights, but he is a guy who can be a massive weapon for you if you were looking to acquire probably a starting pitcher. But again, you can deploy him in several different ways, especially when you get into the playoffs and if you make a deep run into the playoffs. Now, the question is, do I think the Mets will trade Clay Holmes? No, I don't. I think a couple of things will factor in. One, I think his injury baggage, the timing of this injury is going to make it complicated. Now, again, if someone steps up and gives you a Godfather offer that you can't refuse, the Mets will trade him. I just don't think that offer is going to be there for a guy who you're going to have to trade for sight unseen. And if you trade for him, let's say the last possible moment you can, 3:30 p.m. Eastern to 3:59 p.m. Eastern time on August 3rd, there's a chance he might not be ready for another week, another 2 weeks after that. Are you going to move valuable assets to acquire a pitcher and then not even be able to use that pitcher for another 2 weeks, and you're going to have him kind of make his re-debut with you. I don't see it. I don't see a team offering enough to get the Mets to say yes to trading Clay Holmes under those circumstances. And I don't see a team, because of those circumstances, being desperate enough to do it. The other thing is, the Mets, I think, want to keep Clay Holmes. I think they should want to keep Clay Holmes. If it was John Saponaro as GM, I'd want to keep Clay Holmes. So I think the Mets would be foolhardy to not want to keep him. And not only do I think the Mets should want to keep him, I think the Mets should try to extend Clay Holmes sooner rather than later. I think the Mets should try to extend Clay Holmes and get creative before free agency. And look, before free agency means a lot of different things, right? He opts out at the end of the season. You could put a qualifying offer on him, although I don't know why you would. That feels like a little bit of a waste of time, although the Mets could bide their time a bit. I don't think he's going to accept it. That's what I mean by waste of time. Obviously, you could put the qualifying offer on him, and then if he were to sign somewhere else, you could recoup a pick. All of that is true. But I think you do have an exclusive negotiating window 5 days after the World Series to negotiate with your own free agents. I think that's a possibility for Clay Holmes. And honestly, if I were the Mets, I'd look even sooner than that. If Clay Holmes comes back, let's say August 10th, and from August 10th to September 10th, he makes 4 starts and he looks like the guy that he's been for the last 2 years, I would start talking to Clay Holmes and start talking to Clay Holmes agents and just seeing what we can do to turn that option into a guaranteed year and tack on a couple of years on top of it. I think he's a guy who's going to age well because he doesn't rely on the strikeouts. He gets tons of ground balls, and he's kind of regrowing into this starting pitching role where I think he's still got innings on that arm. This is not a guy who's been a career starter. So not only do I think the Mets won't trade him, I don't think they should trade him. I don't think they want to trade him. And I think it would be better for the Mets if they found a way to keep Clay Holmes before he even gets to free agency fully and officially in the offseason. So far, I've got Weaver as a begrudging yes. I've got Clay Holmes as a no for all the reasons I just mentioned. Baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. And you know what I do. I sit down at this computer, I fire up to record Mets Daily, and then real quick before I hit start, pop on over the Kalshi app, see what they have going on. This one is very simple. Yesterday, I gave you guys a little bit of an outside-the-box one with the off day. The Mets are facing off against the Atlanta Braves. It is Christian Scott versus Grant Holmes. I think this game, where the Mets are, they're bad. 15 games under. We talked about it yesterday. But the Braves, they're teetering a little bit. Grant Holmes is fine. Christian Scott is good. I think this game could go either way. And the odds over on Kalshi for the Mets to win kind of reflect that a little bit. Right now, a Mets win is trading at 48 cents a share, which means $100 will get you roughly $201. That's pretty good value. So I would check that out if you believe in Christian Scott and the New York Mets. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, which means there is no house. And as the probability changes, you can trade into and out of your position. For a limited time, you already know, download the Kalshi app and use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10 Kalshi. Trade on anything. Must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. We go back to the relief pitchers now. And of course, you've seen on the rundown on the side here. You know where I'm going with each one of these 4 players. There's no grand reveal as far as that goes. But you will notice that all 4 of the players that I think are the Mets' most valuable chips are pitchers. There's 2 starters, there's 2 relief pitchers. We go back to the relief market, and it's not to say that the Mets don't have anything of value in the lineup, in the everyday player portion of this thing. They do. It's just not anybody that they want to trade. And if they do trade somebody from the position player crop, it's going to be more of a guy that they're trying to get rid of Mark Vientos, maybe to a lesser extent, Brett Beatty. The Mets have plenty of valuable pieces, right? You never want to trade Juan Soto. You can't. You never want to trade Lindor. You can't because of the contract. And then you look like, obviously you're not trading Ewing. You're not trading Benj. You're not trading Alvarez. There's pieces that the Mets need. So the Mets have the excess. The Mets have places they could trade from, mostly on the pitching side. And that brings me to AJ Minter. And we talked about how Luke Weaver has a scoreless inning streak. Well, AJ Minter is also unscored upon this season. Now, he's only appeared in 14 games. He started late. He missed basically all of last season. The Mets, similarly to Weaver, signed Minter to a 2-year deal before last season. He got hurt after being great for the first, I think it was like 3 weeks or so. He got hurt, needed surgery. He missed the rest of the year, and he wasn't ready to start this season. Started the season late, but in 14 games, he has a 0.00 ERA. AJ Minter has been electric, and he's another guy who has big game experience. He pitched in Atlanta for a long time in meaningful games in the end of the summer and the fall. Pitched in a lot of playoff games. AJ Minter has been around the block. He has been there. He has done that. The other thing, it's a massive check mark for AJ Minter, not only being a relief pitcher, but a left-handed relief pitcher. And, you guys know how it works. Left-handed relief pitchers are valuable. Relief pitchers are valuable. Left-handed relief pitchers are more valuable. He is on the final year of his deal, which matters a little bit less for relief pitchers because, again, relief pitchers, they go at the deadline because teams always look to add relief pitchers. It's very odd that a contending team is so set up in the bullpen that they're like, we can't even think of adding somebody else. Even teams with good bullpens are like, you know what? Let's have an even better one. So I don't think his lack of control for another season beyond this one really is a factor for him. I think it's a positive for Weaver. I think it's a non-factor for AJ Minter. Plus, AJ Minter is a bit older, too. So I think that's another part of this. AJ Minter also has a pretty reasonable deal. He makes $11 million this year, but of course, that'll be prorated to the last 2 months of the season. So, it's probably going to be less than half. So, I don't know, $3.5 million, something like that. 3.75 million. I'm just making up a number off the top of my head, but it's going to be somewhere in that range, which means that anybody can afford to acquire AJ Minter, a small market team, a big market team. And if you're the Mets, you're probably willing to kick in some money or kick in all the money to acquire a better prospect in return. Now, I also have these guys ranked this way because I think they are ranked in terms of the kind of return that you could expect. So they're not ranked by likelihood of being dealt. They are ranked by the kinds of returns that you could expect, the value. When I said at the top, I have them ranked by value, starting with the most valuable in Weaver, going to the least valuable of the 4 most valuable players they have to trade. That value is based on what I think the Mets could get back. Now, I think a trade with AJ Minter is highly likely for all of the reasons that I just pointed out. I think the Mets also will, it's not to say they don't like AJ Minter, I don't mean it like that, but AJ Minter was here for such a brief time. He was here for 2 years in the latter stages of his career. He didn't pitch a ton last year. Mets didn't win anything with him. There's no emotional connection to the fans. He started late this year. The Mets are bad again. It's just one of those things that, unlike Luke Weaver, I think, who, is kind of just starting his tenure here, and unlike Luke Weaver, who has been in New York and in this market for a long time where he's going to be a guy who can handle it. AJ Minter can clearly handle it, but I just think there's no attachment. There's nothing that's going to stop the Mets from saying, you know what? Thank you. We appreciate you being here and see you down the road. And again, because of his age, I don't think if the Mets wind up not trading AJ Minter, I don't think the Mets are going to re-sign AJ Minter. They could, but I don't think it's high on their list of priorities, which is also part of the reason why I have AJ Minter on this list and not Brooks Raley. Brooks Raley has been here for longer than AJ Minter, and I could see maybe the Mets deciding to keep Raley around another year. He's also a free agent at the end of this season, but I could see them re-upping with him. Also, Raley's older still. Raley is 38 years old, just turned 38 a couple days ago. And so, he's going to be pitching in his 38, 39 age season next year. So you could probably just get him on a cheaper deal for another 1 year. And he's a guy who's been here a bit longer. And he might be inclined to stay at this stage in his career where he's like, you know what? Look, I got 1 more season, 2 more seasons in me, whatever. I know lefty relief pitchers pitch forever. But I think Raley is the guy that the Mets would probably keep more so than AJ Minter. So I will say this, though. If the relief market explodes in a way where it is a seller's market, and it's always a seller's market for relievers, but if it's a real seller's market, I could see the Mets trading both Minter and Raley, but I'm just going to operate under the assumption that they're going to keep one of the 2 lefties that they have in the bullpen. So I say a trade for Minter is highly likely. I'm not saying the Mets are going to take anything to get rid of him, but I think the Mets will jump at any good offer, any offer that they deem fair. I think the Mets will jump at. So I think Minter is as good as gone. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, if you will, another person, which is a fitting bookend because we've talked so much this season since I've joined this show about Luke Weaver and about Freddie Peralta, and for opposite reasons. So how fitting that we open on Weaver and we end with Peralta. And with Peralta, I don't want to spend a lot of time on him because we just talked about how bad he was on the show yesterday or the day before. So I think if you're a daily listener to Mets Daily, sorry to be redundant, and I hope you are, I think you know a lot of what I'm going to say about Freddie Peralta. Plus, what can I say about Freddie Peralta that you as an astute baseball fan haven't been able to see with 2 human eyes? So I think with Peralta, he has not been good, right? We know that. He's not had a good season. The ERA is bad. It's in the high 4s. And like I talked about on the show the other day, the under the hood stuff is concerning too. It's not just, well, Peralta's on a bad team. He's getting swept up in all the muck. He comes to the Mets after having a good career with the Brewers. The Mets get off to a poor start. Peralta has a couple bad starts. The whole thing spirals. His ERA is bad, and it's just that. No, his K rate is down. His whiffs are down. His fastball effectiveness is down. So there's some under the hood stuff that's not great, but he's a starting pitcher. The starting pitchers are going to get traded always. Starting pitchers are valuable. And despite everything I just said about the under the hood stuff and about the ERA and the standard stats being bad, I think there will be a team that looks at him and says, Freddie Peralta has a track record. Let's get him out of this terrible situation. I can fix him. We can fix him. He'll be better for us than he was for the New York Mets. And the other thing that's a big piece of this, and I mentioned it a bit when we talked about AJ Minter, but it's a big, 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 big piece for Freddie Peralta, is the contract. Now, obviously, Freddie Peralta is a free agent at the end of this season, but Freddie Peralta is making $8 million this year. 8. And again, you prorate that deal over the last couple months, you're looking at like a $2 million salary, $2 million and change, again, 2.5, whatever. And for a guy like Steve Cohen, and he's done this before, we can argue, the returns that the Mets got for the likes of Verlander and Scherzer when they sold off 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. We could argue about the return. I'm not talking about that. We just know that Cohen has a willingness to part with some money if it means you can get a better piece back. I think Freddie Peralta, despite the negatives, is still pretty valuable as a starter, as a guy who has a good fastball, as a guy who has a track record, as a guy, again, who is cheap. The Mets will eat his salary to get back a better piece. And that's significant because, sure, guys, Tarek Skubal might get traded. Tarek Skubal's better than Freddie Peralta. Tarek Skubal's making $30 million this year. Prorated, that's still, I mean, that might be more than Peralta's whole year salary. For the last couple of months, that might be a $10 million hit. So I don't know if the Tigers would be as inclined to eat a bunch of that money to trade him. And so now when you're talking about an acquiring team, some of these teams that, you know, a little tighter around the purse strings, they're not going to be in the market for a Tarek Skubal. Not really. You're going to give up the amount of prospect capital that you need. Now, look, if you think you're a team that can legitimately win the World Series, then sure, you give up the top prospects and it will cost multiple to get Skubal. You take on the $10 million or the $11 million or the $9 million, whatever it is, you take it on because you think you can win a championship. And that's the most important thing. When you're there, when you're close, push the chips in, try to win. I get that. But for a team that's, we're good, we're over 500, there's 3 wild cards, we're probably going to make the playoffs, but I don't know. Could we beat the Dodgers? I'm not sure. Could we beat some of these teams? I don't know. If you're a team like that, and then you're also a team that plays in a small market, doesn't spend money, Peralta's the enticing guy. So I think that it's going to be hard for the Mets to hold on to Peralta. I don't know that the Mets are going to get the Godfather offer, an offer that they cannot refuse in a perfect world because Peralta's not been good enough this season to warrant that. But I do think he's good enough, and with the salary and everything, I do think that he can get you a top 100 prospect back. I mean, look, he's got a few more starts this month, and we talked about that on the show the other day. If he builds his value back up, there's still a chance, especially if he's pitching well and he's the hot hand going into the deadline, Peralta could easily get you back. Still, right now, July 3rd, I don't think he can. But with a month to go, he could pitch his way into getting you back what you gave up for him, which is 2 top 100 prospects. So I think right now it's tricky. I think with Peralta, will the Mets trade him? That's the question. I think it's a coin flip right now. On July 3rd, I think it's a coin flip. I think it's 50-50. Because if he pitches better, he's gone. If he pitches the same, or dare I say it worse, and I fear saying this out loud, but I'm unsure how much worse he could be, then maybe you just decide to keep him. Because the weird thing about Peralta and his bad year is if you can't get value close to what you gave up to get him, then maybe, despite the fact that he's been bad, maybe what you do is offer him the qualifying offer. You keep him, offer him the qualifying offer in the offseason, and hope that he accepts it. If he doesn't, fine, you get your compensatory draft pick, whatever. But if he accepts it, saying, you know what, my first year in Queens, my first year in New York, I thought I could handle it. I was off. The team was off. Never got right. Never could figure it out. I need to bounce back. I don't like free agency, going up against Skubal. I don't like the lockout. I don't want to move again and do the walk year again in a different place if I have to take a pillow contract somewhere else. It's very similar to what happened with Pete Alonso, where the Mets wind up re-signing Pete to what became that 1-year deal after he had that down season in 2024. And then he was able to rebuild his value off of a really good season, and he was able to get his long-term contract. So I think something similar might happen to Peralta. So right now, on June 3rd, Freddie Peralta, to me, is the least valuable of the top 4 most valuable trade chips the Mets have. But he's still in a good spot. And right now, today, July 3rd, I would say it's a coin flip whether or not he's dealt. But it is entirely up to Peralta. If Peralta pitches better over this month, he will be traded. If he doesn't, he might not be, because I don't know if the value is going to be there. So really quickly to recap, I think Weaver is traded. I think it's tough for the Mets to do it. I think they'd like to keep him, but I think they're going to get an offer they can't say no to. Clay Holmes, I think the Mets will keep him. I think the timing of the injury will be a factor, and I think the Mets want to keep him. I think the Mets should want to keep him. I would keep him, and I would look to try to extend Clay Holmes between when he comes back and when you have an exclusive ability to negotiate with your own free agents, because I think the Mets should keep Clay Holmes for another, 3 years, 4 years. We could talk about that in the offseason. Then you have AJ Minter. I think a trade is very, very, very likely for him. Too many things just stack up against the Mets keeping him. It just seems like the perfect trade candidate on a bad team. The perfect guy to trade. And then Freddie Peralta, right now today, I think it's a coin flip, and it could truly go either way. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, we're sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers. We'd love to get to 5,000 before the end of this season. And more importantly, we would love for you to be a part of it. And speaking of love, I said a lot of stuff in this show, this episode, that is purely opinion-based, and I would love to see what you guys think of each of these topics. And if you disagree with whether or not you think they should be traded or will be traded, whether or not you think that this list of 4 players is truly the most valuable 4 players the Mets have to offer, or if you think somebody else should crack this top 4, if you will. I want to hear from it. I want to hear from you, I should say. And I'll do my best to reply to those as you drop those comments in. Anyway, like I said, that's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. My name is John Saponaro. Until next time, see you on Monday.